Now, big talk today. The big topic is energy. We're going through this the whole show, and we are less than a month out from when the AEMO suspended the national energy market. You'll recall that when the lights almost went out across the east coast of the country. Huge energy summit today in which Anthony Albanese has recommitted to this net zero 2050, 43% reduction in GHGs by 2030, promising all sorts of goodies, investment, jobs, money, and a glorious green future. But is this really realistic? Joining me now to discuss is Danny Price from Frontier Economics. Welcome, Danny, to the show.
Thanks for inviting me. Thank you.
So, Danny, look, we saw what happened a month ago. We saw what happened today with the Prime Minister and the government, and what we've heard, what Chris Bowen has been saying in recent weeks. And we know what's going on around the world. Should we really be continuing down this path, or is this time to find an exit ramp for some of these strategies?
Well, I guess the problem for the federal government is that the 43% that they talk about actually comes from aggregating up all the states' targets. It's not a Commonwealth targets, it's just an addition of all the states' targets. So it was always going to be 43%, whether it was Labor or the coalition. So it's really up to the states to make decisions about what they're going to do. And to date, what they've been doing is pouring huge quantities of money into intermittent renewables, wind and solar mainly, and spending very little time on thinking about security of supply. And so really what we really need to be focusing on is security of supply. So it almost doesn't matter what the Commonwealth government's doing, because the states are driving it.
And when you say that the states have been driving this, I mean, is this part of the reason why we've heard so much talk about the coal-fired plants that are going out of date and being turned off, simply not because, they're not effective, but because they've been allowed to be run down by these state governments in places like New South Wales and Victoria?
Yeah, well, the owners of these plants have been told for years now that they're not wanted, they're hated, that no money should go in, and they should be gone sooner rather than later. And so inevitably, the owners of these plants spend less and less and less on these plants, and they become less reliable over time, and they don't fail at some sort of predictable way. And so what they've been doing is failing more often, and we'll see a lot more of that over the coming years. So what we saw just recently is only going to get worse, and simply because we've been spending no time really thinking about the sort of plant that we need in place to keep the system reliable and secure.
So, Danny, if you were the energy minister, or let's say energy czar with powers over the states, we're less than a month out from that incident where the lights almost went out. What policies do you think Australia and the government need to enact to get the country back on track to where we should be, i.e. a country where we, A, don't worry about the lights coming on, and B, in a country that is so rich in resources where power doesn't cost the earth?
Yeah, look, I think the very first thing that we have to do is we need to stabilise, what we laughingly refer to as the market. We've got to recognise we no longer have a market. All of the generation that's been built has been supported by taxpayers in one form or another. Almost no investment in the generation system in the last 5 to 10 years have actually occurred because of the market. And so what we need is a different mechanism for bringing this capacity in. And there's a lot of talk about a capacity mechanism, but and the Energy Security Board, which was set up specifically to address this, has failed miserably. 2 years it took to come up with what's tantamount to a crayon drawing for a capacity mechanism, and that's what the government's gone out with, is to say, give us your ideas after all of this time. Which highlights another problem. The institutions that are running the system are hopeless, quite frankly. The Australian Energy Market Operator recently, only a week ago, asked for a social licence to spend more than $300 billion. What is an supposedly independent market operator asking for a social licence for? I thought that's what the government was for. So the government really needs to decide, the federal government really needs to decide, is it running the energy market or energy policy, or is it the states, or is it the institutions? There needs to be much greater clarity. These institutions must be brought into line. They haven't performed when they have been created to do so. And then they're just on a frolic, wanting to spend taxpayers' money on a grand scale. So we need to fix up those institutions.